Alison Rehill-Erguven is the CEO of Cenomi Centers. So, what Emaar is to Dubai, what Westfield is to London, or Simon Property Group is to the US, Cenomi Centers is to Saudi Arabia. She brings over 25 years of extensive leadership experience across shopping malls and retail real estate globally. Leading the strategic growth and transformation of Cenomi Centers' portfolio, Alison oversees the development, operations, marketing, and asset management functions. Prior to joining Cenomi, Alison was the CEO of Portee Retail Asia, later integrated into Brookfield Asset Management, where she also served as acting head of commercial real estate for Brookfield Properties China. She previously held leadership roles in Europe and Turkey and began her career in the US with Simon Property Group and General Growth Properties. In this episode, Alison talks about what drives her, what she studies most about malls when she walks into one, the Saudi consumer, and the character traits that's needed to be the CEO of a mall developer. So enjoy this podcast episode with Alison Rehill-Erguven. Alison, thank you so much for joining the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you. I'm just amazed when I speak to CEOs and people in positions of influence and wanting to focus more on character and how having a good character sustains calling. Before jumping into that, how does a woman from New Jersey get to be CEO of Cenomi Centers?
It's been an interesting journey, frankly. It's been an interesting journey. I went to FIT in Manhattan
Okay.
and got my bachelor's there. It's a SUNY school. It's a state of New York, state school. But I got my bachelor's there in international trade and marketing. So it be as long as back as I can remember, I wanted to do something in the international sphere. At that time, I thought I wanted to be a fashion buyer, and literally like travel the world and buy collections and life didn't turn out that way. But I graduated with the international trade degree. I went into the garment industry in Manhattan, and I hated it. And
Wow.
FIT is a fantastic job bank for alumni. And so after being really fed up, and I think I was probably in year three ish, maybe four, I went to the job bank and I just started to look at what else can I do here. And I came across a job posting to run the fashion marketing and merchandising program for a fashion school called LaSalle College, which is the sister school of McGill University out of Montreal. And I thought, that's interesting. So I went and interviewed, and 3 weeks later, I was on a plane going to run the fashion marketing and merchandising department in Istanbul. I had a choice of two, Istanbul or Kuala Lumpur. And I literally had to get out a map because I hadn't actually traveled globally yet. And I got out not a map, but you know what I mean, like a world map. And
Right.
I chose Istanbul because it was closer to home than Kuala Lumpur. That was my decision making. I was literally just turning 25. But it
Yeah.
was the greatest thing that I ever did. Being an expat that young, being that brave. I didn't realize how brave it was at the time. To me, it was just like being young and discovering. And I think it is part of your personality if you want to be an expat or a big traveler. Um,
Mhm.
but it opened up my worldview. It opened up my levels of patience and communication, tolerance, etc.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I came back to the States 3.5 years later, thinking that I needed to come home. I was just probably tired. I just needed a visit. But anyway, I came back. I was then married. Um, and I ended up in the States for another 11 years. But it was probably within that first 6 months to 12 months when I got back, I realized, why did I come home? I'm
Mm.
made to live abroad. I can't explain it, but I'm made to live outside my comfort zone and outside of the United States. So anyway, Fast forward, I was in the States for 11 years. That's when I switched careers and went into real estate. I had a tough time getting back into fashion, but that was a blessing. Not, hindsight 2020. And I started with Simon
Right.
Property Group, and I had a
Okay.
different malls. I started in specialty leasing. I was in one of the regional offices, which was great because it gave me more exposure. Um, but that international background really helped me. Specialty leasing has a tendency to be very um, multicultural. We're talking about
I
all the
see.
businesses, yeah, that are in the common areas, et cetera. So it was a good fit. And again, I think I really credit back to this expat term that I did. I think it's why my career just progressed so quickly. And I just kept achieving and getting promoted. I then moved to GGP. So Simon Property Group is the largest owner and operator of shopping centers in the United States. So it was a phenomenal, what do you call that, training ground. And then I moved to
Hmm.
GGP, which is the second largest. And I was there for 9 years. And they began an international department in the early 2000s. And as soon as they did, I remember turning to my husband and I said, I'm getting in that department. So by 2006, I had gotten into that department and they were actually just beginning a joint venture for Turkey. So there was the second time my life touches Turkey. Fast forward, global financial crisis, etc. I get a call from a private equity firm in London who had heard, at this point now, I've been in the department about 3.5 years, and I've made connections, and I've been, involved in our joint ventures, whether it was Brazil or Turkey. And I started to get known, and so my name was passed around to a private equity firm who had business in Turkey and needed a new head for the country. And I got a call,
Hmm.
and that's what got us back out. And that was 11 years later, and that was 2010. And I was with that company for 12 years. I did 7.5 years in Istanbul, but I also oversaw Central and Eastern Europe during that time period as well. And then we created a joint venture with Macquarie Bank out of Australia for Asia because we kept growing. And so I then became the CEO of that joint venture, which was based in Shanghai. So in 2017, moved the family to Shanghai. We lived there for five
Wow.
years through COVID. And it was in 2022 that I got a call for this job in Saudi Arabia, which was incredibly intriguing. As it's the largest shopping center owner, it's in Saudi. It's going through its own transformation, and it was time. It was time to leave Pradera. It was time to leave China, and that was 3 years ago. So here we are.
Wow. That's an inspiring story. You kind of touched on my next question, which is you've lived in South America, Turkey, US,
I haven't left
Europe now.
America. I oversaw a joint venture in Brazil. Yeah.
Gotcha, gotcha. And you mentioned a little bit before about how being abroad changes like your worldview, and yeah, it impacts your life. I think it makes it richer. I've lived in 9 countries, and some things like I realize I see the US in a different way
Yeah.
than I would have not seen it if I had lived abroad.
Yes.
So, how, if somebody has the opportunity to go live abroad, what advice would you give if they're hesitant about it, if they're worried about it's unsafe or whatever it is?
Safety is a different point. So I would never give advice on safety. Being older now, I would say, all right, you need to mitigate, you need to understand the pros and cons here and what is the safety profile of that country. But that aside, safety aside, I would say go, don't think twice, pack your bags. You can always come home. It is that simple,
Yeah.
but it's that simple to me now. And I'll tell you what, those first 2 weeks that I left that very first time, my bags were still packed. I never even unpacked because I wasn't even sure. I was like, I need to make a break to the airport potentially. So I never even unpacked my bags for the first 2 weeks. But then yeah, I fell in love, and it was quick. It was like within 2, 3 weeks I was hooked, literally.
Wow. Yeah, it's a experience like none other. Um, Question, do you feel like emerging markets like India is a hot place at the
Mhm.
moment? Saudi in many ways is a hot place still. Are great places to work and get experience?
It's a good question. You know, I have by default ended up in emerging markets. It was not the plan. I didn't have a plan. It's just how life has evolved for me. I find my life very rich though because of these emerging markets. They still usually have a lot of their culture intact. They're interesting from a landscape perspective, from a language perspective, from a cuisine perspective. I find emerging markets a bit difficult, but probably more exciting than an assignment in London. You know, but if it's your first
Mm.
assignment, you know, London could be great. It wasn't mine. Mine was Istanbul, you know. So, uh,
Yeah,
but I think any assignment that you get, security aside, safety aside, um, you will learn something new about yourself, about your home, about where you are, and it will change perspectives. There's no doubt in my mind.
for sure. I totally agree.
Yeah.
What drives you?
In my youth, my ambition, my blind ambition to just achieve. I don't know where it came
Mm.
from. Um, it was just there always. And I just wanted to go and do and explore. A curiosity, I don't know. Now, I still have that curiosity. I still like to learn. I'm a little older now, I'm a little more tired now, but the motivation for me is probably still financially for my family. I am the breadwinner,
Mhm.
so there's
Mhm.
still some runway, you know, in that term with you know kids in college and things like that. But I think it's the learning. I think it's the experiencing and the learning angle that still drives me to find new. Just last week, I was looking at. I've been to India once, and it's a
Mhm.
really interesting place to go. I was there on business,
Mhm.
and it's full of contradictions and what do you call that? Opposites. That's not the word I was looking for, but extremes, extremes. You know, and yet I would go back. You know, despite the smells and the cows and the poverty, and it's such a fascinating place to be. And I was literally that last week looking at this like amazing trip, and I want to bring my husband who has no desire, but I keep
To go.
he doesn't, but I keep telling him like, you will love it. Trust me, you will
Yeah.
love it. You know, because he fortunately
Yeah.
married somebody who's very similar in terms of that exploration and learning and you know wanting to experience.
Would you say that's important in choosing a life partner is kind of being aligned on a lot of things like that? Like if one likes to explore, the other one needs to like some version of it
Absolutely.
as well?
I, I,
Yeah.
I don't, you know, I think there are some things that can be opposites. You know, we do have differences, obviously, between us, but we do share um, a passion for travel and experience and exploration and living life a little more difficultly,
Differently or
differently, and we don't mind it being a little more difficult. That's what I was trying to say,
I see.
because sometimes that friction creates
Mhm.
more interesting experiences. Like our first 6 months in
Mm.
China, he was like, I don't know. I don't know about because nobody was speaking English. It was really difficult. Thank God for apps. I don't know how people did it a decade before, or even 5 years before. But then once you get under the belly of the culture and you find those nuances and you work through the friction, we loved living in China. Loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It takes some time to adjust. I remember when I got to London for my master's and I thought the Brits were going to be like Americans and they're not. And I called my mom and I said, I'm coming home. And she's a teacher. And she's like, no, you're not. I have a class. And she hung up. But by the end of the first semester, I fell in love with London and was trying to get a job that would provide the visa.
Yep.
But that didn't work out. Anyways, how would you describe to a kindergartner what you do?
How would I describe to a kindergartner what I do?
Yes.
I, oh my goodness. Okay. I would tell them that I, I go to work every day, which is a big building. And inside that building are lots of people. And every day I talk to lots of people, um, and I ask them to please do their work, play nicely with each other, have fun at what they're doing, and that we try to create places, buildings where they can have fun, where they can eat some ice cream or buy a toy or go find a new piece of clothing or even go play a game or see a movie. Howard off.
Yeah, that's a great easy way to
Yeah,
explain what you do. Yeah.
yeah.
um, would I be wrong in saying what Emaar is to Dubai or Westfield is to London is what Cenomi is to Saudi?
I
Is that a correct?
I would agree with you. I think I
Okay.
think what you know the only we are the largest. Okay, so I think in terms of the largest, I think it would be Majid Al Futtaim in Dubai as the largest. What we are trying to build, though, these we have two new malls that are coming out next year that will look like, or our aspiration at least, is a Dubai mall or a Westfield slash Stratford, London. So I I I think that's a very nice way to put it. Thank you.
Okay. um, please tell me there's a mall going to Al Ula.
I haven't look. I'll tell you what. Tourism retail is tough because there are so
Mm,
many factors that can affect it that are out of your control. That
mm,
economic, geopolitical, environmental, you name it. That tourism retail can be a very tough prospect. I would love to see something happen there, but in a very authentic, culturally relative way. I don't know if you've been to the Old Town. It's quite lovely.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. In my humble opinion,
I
that might even be enough, frankly. But I know what you're saying.
When I was there, my suitcase, when I landed, got damaged, and I had the hardest time. I had to go to like a hypermarket,
Mm,
which is like if Dollar Tree
yes.
and I don't or Woolworths had a baby or something like that,
I'm
and it wasn't the best quality.
I'm sure.
And yeah,
Oh, that's
there's
interesting. But
yeah,
that's an interesting point, though, even to give the Alula Royal Commission feedback on is that they're perfect examples of that story, and that they probably should have some sort of maybe even convenience tourism retail available, in the event that
yes,
things like that happen. But Alula is amazing.
ex- yeah, I totally agree. Saudi is a fascinating place, and for those who don't know much about the country, how would you describe what's going on there?
So, look, Saudi was not open to the world basically for many
Mhm.
decades. And it only opened to the world in 2018, September. So we're coming on 7 years this September.
Mhm.
And, they are led by a prime minister. I think he's the prime minister, the crown prince, who
Mhm.
is young, educated, I think with a law degree, and is very focused on changing the dynamic in the company while preserving its identity, its cultural heritage, and its authenticity in those realms. And I think they're doing a really, really good job of it. And they are very tech savvy. It's a very young country. Even if I just
Mhm.
started there, I think it's more than 65% of the population is under the age of 35. This is young. And they are very well traveled. They are very well educated. So you have a lot of Saudis that have lived outside of Saudi, usually
Yeah.
getting educated in Europe, London, or the United States. So they've seen what's out there. They know what's out there. The level of like fluency in English is incredible to me. Um,
Yeah.
and so it's a really dynamic place. They're because of the youth profile, they're very technologically savvy. I think they're the number one
Mhm.
user of either Snapchat or YouTube in the world. Like and Instagram, like they're in the top 20 on Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, YouTube, etc. It's incredible, their consumption. And they have influencers. Um, and they're, if they weren't ready to open up to the
Yeah.
world and to change a lot of the dynamic that they had even within themselves, separating single men from women, only family, it's completely like it's completely connected now. I can't even imagine
Hmm.
living here when it was the way it was, you know, uh, 8 years ago,
Yeah.
you know. Um,
Yeah.
and if they weren't ready, you would have had a civil war. They were so ready to open and change and be dynamic. And a lot of the change that they're doing is fueled by technology, which is really incredible. Um,
Yeah.
and a lot of the projects that they're doing is also, there's also very real estate focused because they've got a lot of catching up to do. They look at Dubai as an example. Um,
Hmm.
so there's just, it's just an incredibly interesting place to be due to its transformation. To be in the early stages of that and to be a part of that is, especially as a female, is really inspiring. Really, really inspiring.
It is. It is. It's amazing to see. What's a typical day like for you in your job?
Well, first of all, this is how I go to work. I'm not covered. I am in an abaya. Well, I should have done that, but I am in an abaya. Not an abaya, but like a long,
Right.
any kind of thing.
Yes.
And I do that primarily just out of respect. I am a leader of a company, like know your lane kind of thing. But I've
Yes.
I've seen even just in these last 3 years such a change. Like when I first got here, many of the women would choose just a plain black abaya, and this is all you really saw walking around. But a lot of the women here have gone uncovered because it's not mandatory anymore. You don't even have to cover your hair if you don't want. It's not mandatory. There's more color.
Hmm.
There's more color coming into the scene, fashion scene, which is lovely. And even going through the airport now, I've noticed foreign women used to cover up a lot, and now, like, they're not, And you'll see, what's his name? Ronaldo. He's married to that Georgina.
Yes.
And I only bring that up because when she first got here, which is around the same time, she did the traditional, she might have had tight jeans on, but she had an abaya on. Now she's going to Riyadh Fashion Week, or she's going here, she's going there, and she's in the tightest of tightest dresses, off the shoulder, hair done, and sitting right next to one of the ministers. And it's not an event. So it's really interesting. The dynamic just keeps changing. And I don't want to say improving because that wouldn't be proper to say. It's not an improvement because that just means that I view it improperly. It's not it. But there's more of an openness that keeps coming.
Yes.
And I see it evolving, and again, it's just really exciting to be a part of that as well.
Obviously, you've studied the Saudi consumer market and the fact that 30 or 60% of the population is under the age of 35, and the fact that women can now drive. I'm sure that impacts how you think about shopping centers. What is the most challenging part about integrating the data that you all collect on the Saudi consumer to make these great shopping experiences?
Um, you know, we're fortunate that we are, the largest platform, and the company was established over 20 years ago. So there's been always been a lot of learnings on the Saudi consumer specifically. And even though women couldn't drive, maybe 7, 8 years ago, they were still driven to the shopping centers, and they've always been predominantly the majority of our consumer. Um, it's funny. I don't see that many unusual challenges here now, unlike I would see in China or in Turkey. I would say probably my greatest nemesis in
Mm-hmm.
general would be online shopping.
Ah,
And yeah, and so what's happened with the advent of online shopping is that, shopping centers, brick and mortar presence has had to really pay attention and continually evolve its offering to ensure that it's relevant to the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say the biggest challenge that we have is to continue to remain relevant with the growing online sales penetration. But the
Mm.
one thing that we do know about Saudi specifically, and I would say this more so than China, is that here, you know, they're still developing the country. There's really not a downtown in many of these towns. The mall serves as a place to walk, be with your family, have a meal, see a movie, buy clothing, do food shopping. It's still a pretty important part of the life here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but online shopping has meant that I need to really look at the tenant mix. But I had to do this in China, and I've had to do this in Turkey and the United States, and understand the sales and merchandise more towards those sales. So where we used to have a split of, let's say, 70-30, 70 traditional retail, 30% food, entertainment services, that has now moved to a 60-40 split.
Mm-hmm.
So I've taken now 10 points from traditional retail and moved it more towards food, entertainment, and services, and lifestyle things like a clinic
Mm-hmm.
or beauty spa or education for children, meaning
Mm-hmm.
like tutoring, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So the biggest challenge is to continue to ensure you are relevant in the eye of the consumer. One thing in our research that we did is we've understood that the Saudi consumer really does like an omni-channel experience. That might be unusual for compared to other markets, but I think that is also because of what I mentioned. The mall is a key component of their life. Thank
Mm-hmm.
God. And air conditioning acts as an anchor store, I always say, but it is important. So it's that relevancy, is super important. And it's not just the merchandising, it's the cleanliness, it's the safety, it's the events that you put on to bring a community together. You're a part of the community, so you need to stay relevant with the community and communicate with the community.
Why do you think malls are a central part of the Saudi lifestyle? I would also say the Emirati as well, compared to
Yeah,
like the US.
because the US has, first of all, it's climate.
Mm.
Okay, it's hot. And so this is an air conditioned place. That's why I was saying the air conditioning actually almost acts like a really great department store for me because it brings people in when it's really hot. But I think even more than that, these these this part of the world was really, I mean, it started as Bedouin tribe,
Mm.
and it didn't really build like a traditional Western city like we think of, with a downtown and a promenade and trade. It didn't evolve that way. It went in reverse. And
Mhm.
so now you've seen Dubai evolve over the last 20-25 years with a proper downtown and all the tourism and all. That's where Saudi is now at the, I would say, first, third stage of building those elements that make it an actual city that people would want to visit and see, from a cultural perspective, business perspective, et cetera. So I think I think the landscapes are vastly different. I don't
Yeah,
even mean geography wise, just culturally, et cetera. So I think that's why the shopping center is it's literally culturally relevant in this part of the world for many reasons.
for sure. Sonomi is evolving the shopping center experience, and I've heard you say in interviews evolving to a lifestyle destination or
Huh.
lifestyle destination centers. What does that mean? I imagine it's like what you just said, the 60-40,
Yep.
moving more towards the food and beverage. Are there any other components?
Let me think. So when you move towards lifestyle, it means that you could come to my center
Mhm.
and potentially go have a doctor visit, or go to the spa, or go to the gym,
Mhm.
which is a part of, it's more extended lifestyle services and uses. Get your hair done, get your nails done,
Mm.
and have a meal, and do your food shopping, which fulfills your life. Or bring your family, do those things, and go see a movie or play in one of the entertainment centers. So I think it's not traditional shopping anymore. It's not going into a fashion store and buying clothing and going home. I think it fulfills, and that's the relevancy aspect. We try to fulfill many more aspects of your life so that we're relevant for you
Yeah.
and we're a place you want to come.
And that you don't really need to leave. You can kind of spend the whole day there, which sounds like the Pentagon or the UN complex, where they have created underground like these mini malls and swimming and gyms and banks. And yeah,
Yeah,
it's an
similar.
experience. It's definitely an
Yeah.
experience. I'm curious when you walk into a mall that you've never been in, what's the
Hmm.
first thing that you look at?
Hmm. I think by default, cleanliness and the materials they've used, because the materials they've used will immediately identify to me the kind of mall that I'm in.
Mm,
So if I'm walking in and it's super clean and I'm seeing marble and shiny floors, I know that I'm in a more high-end mall than, maybe not. Okay.
right.
And probably it all kind of happens at the same time. And then you're looking at the stores and you'll immediately be able to identify, especially if you walk in, if there's luxury, you'll understand where you are,
Mhm.
and what you've walked into. So it's kind of this combination of the immediate sense of the materials that have been used, the cleanliness of the mall, and the type of merchandising that I'm seeing in that area. You also have malls that have luxury area and then have more, fast fashion and, you know, I wouldn't say value, but, more mass appeal.
Mhm.
And it could be that you start with marble and then you move into ceramic tile, but the cleanliness would always be the same because those standards would be the same. Um, but yeah, I pay attention to the detail
I'm
because it'll
sure.
it'll allow me to understand the kind of operator and the kind of center that I'm in.
I can imagine you're probably paying attention to things that people who aren't in the mall business are not even aware of.
100%. And it's funny because my family has grown up in it. I've noticed that my husband especially will like you can't walk through a shopping center again the same way once you understand the shopping center business to your exact point. All of a sudden you just see things that no one else would know.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I'm sure your kids, when they're talking to their friends, they're like, oh, this is all wrong. Like they should have this over here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe not my son, maybe my daughter, but I'm not sure about my son.
Okay, a few last quick questions. Um, I feel like malls in the US are dead, and I think we kind of talked about this when I met you in Riyadh. I say this especially where I grew up, and malls in the Middle East are just so much more different. Like Mall of the Emirates, there are these dedicated drop-off points for the taxis. If you have a private driver, there's a VIP section. Um, why do you think, or how do these unique offerings enhance the mall experience? What could Americans learn from this?
Oh, I have read recently in a couple of articles, I would say in the last 12 months, there seems to be a bit of a renaissance with the American mall, and
Mm,
that the mall's not dead. But I'm sure it's not every mall. And it's this Alpha and Gen Z generation that's kind of bringing new life because the children have a tendency to be the voice of how money is spent in the household. And so if they want to go to the mall and have an experience, then that's driving that. I think the difference is this: America created the mall industry
yeah.
a very long time ago. A lot of the malls that have been built were built in potentially the 70s, 80s, 90s, and some in the 2000s. I started in 99, and there wasn't that much development happening thereafter. You had maybe, uh, I don't know how many, but it is not that many great malls that have been built. And I think sometimes the United States has a tendency to not look outside.
Mm,
And the real estate business has a tendency to react very slowly
mm,
to things that are coming at it, like online. Um, even just marketing, we're terrible at marketing, even our own companies, and I think they're just slow to react. It's just in the DNA. I don't know why.
Mhm.
Whereas, and you're really speaking of emerging markets, but I would even give Europe a great shout because they've done some amazing things with property in London and Paris, where they've taken old buildings and restoration projects, and they have added kind of the newest and the latest and the greatest in technology. Um, uh, Honestly, I think it's just complacency on the
Mhm.
United States part,
Yeah.
um, and that the youth also drive a lot of this. Turkey has a very similar age demographic profile. China has a very similar age demographic profile. I think a lot of emerging markets do. So you're getting that influence, um, and they're very quick to adapt. And if they don't like it, they get rid of it.
Mhm.
I don't think the United States is that nimble
Mhm. Mhm.
still, and real estate again moves very slowly. I would hope and think that they're getting better at it, especially in the last decade. um, but I haven't been working in the United States for a really long time, so
Yeah,
I haven't really paid attention to what they're doing and what's going on. But I do believe they could take a lot of cues from Europe and from Asia,
for sure.
even Middle East included, in terms of improvement and relevancy.
Yeah. I think the US is good at being the first and to create these amazing kind of ideas, but not at necessarily maintaining it because I always thought Americans have a really good hospitable culture, especially in the South. But then you go to Asia and you go to the Middle East, and then you realize their hospitality is on another level, and it comes out in things like mall experiences. And it's like the little things. And yeah, I hope they come back in the US because there's nothing like, I watch a movie from the 80s and you see a mall scene and you just remember, going to the mall and being stuck in the parking lot looking for nobody's at the mall anymore. Everyone's on Amazon in the US, or if they're at the malls, over half the parking lot's empty. There's not that
Wow.
Christmas spirit. So
Really,
it's just
really.
it's not like it was when I was a child. So
Okay.
yeah, I hope that mall people like you in the US are looking at these things. How have you had to learn how to deal with challenges in the boardroom as a woman leader?
Mm. I would say the first, I began sitting on boards in 2009, and it was by default. We were going through a bankruptcy. There was a lot of turmoil, and they needed to fill a button a seat. So I ended up on the board of our JV in Brazil and our JV in Turkey, and I did that for about a year prior to leaving. And I would honestly say I wasn't prepared, and I wasn't confident, and I basically sat most of the time quiet and observing. But I observed.
Mm.
And one of the things that I observed, and I'll use Turkey more as the reference, our joint venture partner at the time was German. And I would watch them speak with our side, and I just watched the dynamics. And a lot of the dynamics haven't necessarily changed, but I've just become more knowledgeable and more confident. And my cues in the boardroom, like not a lot, that's not fair, but there are many people that, need to be heard or need to be validated. Um, and that was a lot of observation for a few years. Um, and I found my voice in ensuring that I chose my moments when I knew, or I believed at least, that my contribution was going to add value.
Mm.
Now, as time has gone on, more confidence comes,
Mm.
because you get validated that you added value. I have one NED position now it's going on 9 years. It's a long time. Um, and they keep giving me some more responsibility, adding onto audit committee and risk committee, and it's great. And the more the more you add, but measured, and it lands, the more confident you get.
Yeah.
And so it's, I would say the first half of the time was really observation. Then somewhere in the middle was trial and error. And now it's a bit more of a refined skill of like knowing who the dynamics and personalities are in the room, reading the room. I
Mm.
think EQ is the greatest skill anybody can have, and you just can keep refining it and refining it and refining it. And I think EQ in the boardroom is incredibly important. Um, and just, you need to contribute, but just make sure that don't do it for the sake of contributing.
Yeah.
People see right through it.
Yeah.
So,
Gotcha. Last question. Because having a good character sustains your calling, uh, what in your job, what kind of character is needed for you to be sustained as the CEO?
mm, I want to say authenticity, but the word is used.
Mhm.
It's been bastardized. But what I mean by authenticity is just being true to yourself.
Mhm.
And, you know, I'm a collaborator, I'm a good communicator, I'm kind. And I try to make people feel safe,
Mhm.
and I don't have any issues telling someone when they're wrong,
Sure.
giving some constructive feedback, even yelling at times when I need to.
Mhm.
But it's all kind of authentic because it's coming from a place of like who I am, and I would do it anyway.
Yeah.
So if I could, yeah, I know you asked for one thing, and that's the word, but that's my definition of the word could be very different than someone else's definition. That's my authenticity.
Of
And
course.
and it's been commented on enough for me,
Mhm.
as feedback sessions from people that have reported to me or colleagues, that I you start to believe, that must be it. So
Yeah, I think that's definitely a great character quality because you're an approachable person. A lot of CEOs aren't, and
mm,
I think the reason why people like you and Jerry and Zarello are really good at what you do is because you're authentic and approachable,
thank you.
and that's key because
Yeah.
you people are looking up to you and
Mm,
yeah, that makes a difference. So, Alison,
thank
thank
you.
you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you, Allie. Thank you for having me. I'm always humbled and honored when someone asks me. So thank you.
Of course, look forward to seeing you at Riyadh Fashion Week.
Yes, definitely. It's a date.
Yes. I hope that you enjoyed this podcast episode and that you have found a soulful connection to the conversation. God bless you, and until the next episode, go bless somebody else.